Sometimes the worst punishment in life is seeing the person you destroyed survive without you. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor exactly 3 seconds before Damien Whitmore saw her face. The sound sliced through the ballroom of the Grand Astoria Hotel, sharp enough to silence half the room. Violin music still floated beneath the crystal chandeliers. Wealthy guests still laughed beside towers of imported champagne and gold-trimmed desserts. But Damien heard none of it anymore. Because kneeling near table 12 in a black waitress uniform stained with red wine was Evelyn Carter, his ex-wife, 8 months pregnant. Her trembling hands moved quickly as she wiped the floor with a white towel already streaked with crimson from a cut on her palm. For one horrible second, Damien forgot how to breathe. Evelyn looked thinner than he remembered. Pale. Exhausted. The soft, golden hair he once kissed every morning was now tied into a loose ponytail beneath a cheap catering cap. Even from 20 feet away, he could see shadows beneath her eyes like bruises left behind by sleepless nights. She looked nothing like the elegant woman who used to stand beside him at charity galas wearing silk gowns worth more than most people's rent. She looked like someone life had forgotten. "Careful," Vanessa Sinclair said loudly beside him, her diamond engagement ring flashing beneath the ballroom lights. "The help isn't supposed to bleed on the guests." A few nervous laughs spread across nearby tables. Evelyn lowered her eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, ma'am." Damien felt something cold move through his chest. 2 years ago, Evelyn had disappeared from his world after the divorce papers were finalized. No calls. No interviews. No social media. It was as if she had simply vanished after he accused her of cheating on him with a former driver from his company. Back then, Vanessa had shown him photos, messages, evidence that looked undeniable. Damien remembered the rage. The humiliation. The way Evelyn cried while insisting she never betrayed him. He remembered not believing her. And now she was here. Carrying a child. Cleaning tables at his engagement party. The baby moved suddenly beneath Evelyn's oversized uniform apron, a sharp movement that made her freeze for half a second. Her hand instinctively pressed against her stomach. Damien noticed immediately. His throat tightened. 8 months, maybe more. A dangerous thought hit him so hard it nearly made him stumble backward. No. The timing couldn't possibly. "Damien?" Vanessa's voice snapped beside him, sweet but edged with warning. "Why are you staring at her?" Before he could answer, Evelyn tried lifting a heavy tray filled with empty crystal glasses. Her arms shook violently from the weight. One of the younger waitresses whispered, "Evelyn, you should sit down. You don't look okay." Evelyn forced a weak smile. "I can't lose this job." Then it happened. The tray slipped. Crystal exploded across the ballroom floor. Gasps echoed beneath the chandeliers. Evelyn swayed dangerously, one hand gripping the edge of a table as her face drained of color. And before Damien could move, a deep male voice suddenly cut through the silence from the entrance of the ballroom. "Does he know that baby almost died because of what he did to you?" Every head turned. A tall man dressed in black stood near the grand staircase, rain still dripping from his coat onto the marble floor. His cold blue eyes locked directly onto Damien Whitmore. And Evelyn looked absolutely terrified. The ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Rain tapped softly against the enormous glass windows overlooking Manhattan while hundreds of wealthy guests stared toward the man standing at the entrance like he had just walked out of a funeral instead of a $1 billion engagement party. Damien Whitmore recognized him instantly. Julian Hayes. Founder of Hayes Biotech. One of the youngest tech billionaires in America. A man famous for avoiding public events, and even more famous for destroying competitors without raising his voice. Damien had met him twice before during investment meetings. Julian never smiled. Never lingered. Never lost control. But tonight his expression looked dangerously close to fury. Vanessa recovered first. She tightened her grip around Damien's arm and forced a laugh sharp enough to cut glass. "I think someone invited the wrong guest." No one laughed this time. Julian ignored her completely. His eyes stayed fixed on Evelyn, who still stood frozen beside the shattered tray. Damien noticed her lips trembling. Not from embarrassment. From fear. Real fear. Julian, Evelyn whispered softly. Hearing her say another man's name felt like ice sliding beneath Damien's skin. Julian crossed the ballroom floor slowly, his expensive black shoes crunching over broken crystal. Several guests stepped aside instinctively. Even the violinist stopped playing. You should not be standing, Julian said quietly when he reached Evelyn. Your doctor told you to stay off your feet for more than 20 minutes at a time. Damien blinked hard. Doctor? Evelyn lowered her eyes. I needed the money. Her voice sounded fragile, thinner than Damien remembered. The hospital bills increased this month. Damien felt his stomach tighten. Hospital bills. Before he could process the words, Evelyn suddenly grabbed the edge of the table again. Her face twisted slightly in pain. Julian immediately steadied her with one hand beneath her elbow. The movement was protective. Familiar. Vanessa noticed it too. Interesting, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Looks like the struggling single mother found herself another rich man. Evelyn flinched like the words physically hurt her. Damien expected Julian to ignore the insult. Instead, the billionaire slowly turned toward Vanessa with a look so cold the room temperature itself seemed to drop. Be careful, he said softly. You have no idea what this woman survived. Silence swallowed the ballroom. Damien stared at Evelyn again. She avoided looking at him completely. That hurt more than anger would have. 2 years ago she begged him to believe her. She cried in their penthouse kitchen until sunrise, insisting she never betrayed him. Damien still remembered every detail from that night. The rain against the windows. The suitcase beside the staircase. The way her voice broke when she asked him one final question. Who benefits from us destroying each other? Back then he thought it was manipulation. Now he was not so sure anymore. Vanessa stepped forward before Damien could speak. Security, she snapped. Remove them both. But nobody moved. Because at that exact moment the massive ballroom screen flickered once overhead. Then twice. The engagement slideshow disappeared. A surveillance video replaced it instead. Grainy black and white footage filled the 30-foot screen. Gasps spread through the crowd instantly. Damien turned sharply toward the image. The timestamp read 2 years earlier. His own office building. A parking garage. Vanessa appeared on screen wearing sunglasses and speaking to a private investigator Damien recognized immediately. The audio crackled through hidden speakers overhead. You only need to make it believable, Vanessa's recorded voice said casually. Fake messages. Photos. Whatever it takes. He cannot marry her if he thinks the baby is his. The ballroom exploded into whispers. Damien felt the blood drain from his face. The screen continued. The investigator handed Vanessa a folder. She smiled. Once the divorce is done, I will handle the rest. Damien's heartbeat pounded so hard he barely heard the next sentence. A pregnant wife is emotional anyway. He will believe anything if I cry first. Turn it off, Vanessa screamed suddenly. Panic shattered her polished voice for the first time all night. This is fake. But nobody believed her anymore. Especially not Damien. His mind replayed everything at once. Evelyn crying alone in the guest room. Evelyn begging him not to end their marriage. Evelyn collapsing in the courthouse hallway after signing the divorce papers while he walked away without turning back. Dear God. The baby? Damien looked at Evelyn slowly. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach again. 8 months pregnant. The timing crashed into him like a freight train. Evelyn, he whispered. She finally looked at him. Tears filled her eyes instantly, but they were not tears of love anymore. They looked like the tears of someone remembering every night they survived alone. You were supposed to trust me, she said quietly. The words nearly destroyed him. Then her knees suddenly buckled beneath her. The sound Damien Whitmore feared most was not screaming. It was silence. The kind of silence spreading through the ballroom now as Evelyn collapsed forward beneath the crystal lights while 200 wealthy strangers watched his entire life crack apart in real time. Julian caught her before she hit the marble floor. "Call an ambulance," he barked immediately. His calm voice cut through the panic like steel. Several guests finally snapped out of their shock and reached for their phones. Vanessa stepped backward so quickly she nearly lost balance in her designer heels. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is not happening." Damien barely heard her. His entire world narrowed to Evelyn's pale face resting against Julian's arm. She looked so fragile now. Too fragile. Damien suddenly remembered something he had spent 2 years trying to forget. The first time Evelyn fainted during their marriage. She had been standing barefoot in their kitchen wearing one of his oversized sweaters while making pancakes on a Sunday morning. Damien remembered how terrified he felt carrying her to the couch afterward. He remembered staying awake the entire night afterward watching her breathe because he could not stand the thought of losing her. That memory destroyed him now because somewhere along the way he had stopped protecting her and started believing the worst about her instead. "Evelyn," he said hoarsely as he dropped beside her. "Hey! Look at me!" Her eyelids fluttered weakly. Julian blocked Damien with one arm before he could touch her. "Do not!" The single word carried enough warning to freeze him instantly. Damien stared at the other billionaire in disbelief. "That is my wife." Julian's expression darkened. "Ex-wife," he corrected coldly. "The woman you abandoned while she was pregnant and homeless." Every whisper in the ballroom seemed to grow louder. Homeless. Damien looked back at Evelyn in horror. No. That could not be true. Evelyn came from an upper-middle-class family in Connecticut. She had a degree in literature. She had friends. Connections. She could not possibly have ended up homeless. Julian seemed to read the disbelief on Damien's face because his jaw tightened sharply. "You really do not know anything about what happened to her after the divorce, do you?" Damien could not answer. Because the truth was unbearable. He had not checked. Not once. After the divorce he buried himself in work while Vanessa carefully filled every empty silence around him. She planned vacations, charity events, interviews. She became the perfect distraction from the guilt he refused to examine too closely. Every time he almost searched Evelyn's name online, Vanessa reminded him of the fake evidence again. The messages. The photographs. The hotel receipts. Damien wanted to believe betrayal because betrayal hurt less than admitting he failed the only person who ever loved him without conditions. Evelyn stirred weakly against Julian's chest. "The baby," she whispered faintly. "Please." Julian immediately softened. "The baby is okay," he said quietly. "Focus on breathing." Damien's heart stopped. The baby. Dear God. A horrible possibility was beginning to form fully in his mind now. 8 months pregnant. The timing aligned perfectly with the final weeks of their marriage. Damien suddenly remembered Evelyn telling him she felt sick constantly before the divorce. He remembered accusing her of pretending to gain sympathy during their arguments. The memory made nausea twist violently through him. "Is the baby mine?" he asked before he could stop himself. The question echoed louder than shouting inside the ballroom. Several guests openly gasped. Evelyn closed her eyes. One tear slipped silently down her cheek. That was answer enough. Damien physically recoiled like someone had struck him. His child. His child had been growing inside her this entire time while he publicly replaced her with another woman. Vanessa suddenly grabbed Damien's arm hard enough to snap him out of the spiral. "You cannot seriously believe this," she hissed under her breath. She probably planned this entire thing with him. Julian slowly stood to his full height. The room felt smaller somehow when he did. "You should stop talking," he warned Vanessa quietly. "Every sentence makes you look worse. You uploaded fake footage onto that screen." Vanessa snapped. "I know exactly what you are trying to do." Julian gave a humorless smile. Actually, your former investigator uploaded it himself after accepting immunity from federal prosecution this afternoon. The color drained completely from Vanessa's face. Damien turned toward her slowly. Federal prosecution? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time since Damien met her, Vanessa Sinclair looked afraid. Truly afraid. The ballroom doors suddenly opened again. 3 men in dark suits entered alongside hotel security. Damien recognized one immediately. Agent Marcus Hale from the Federal Financial Crimes Division. Guests began murmuring loudly now as phones discreetly recorded everything. Manhattan society loved scandals almost as much as money. Miss Sinclair, Agent Hale said professionally, we need to ask you several questions regarding fraud, falsified financial transfers, and corporate embezzlement connected to Whitmore Holdings. Vanessa laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. We have warrants, Agent Hale replied calmly. Damien felt his stomach drop even further. Embezzlement. His company. Suddenly dozens of small moments from the last year replayed differently in his mind. Missing reports? Strange wire transfers. Financial discrepancies Vanessa always blamed on assistants or accountants who mysteriously quit afterward. Dear God. Evelyn opened her eyes again weakly and looked directly at Damien for the first time since collapsing. There was no anger there anymore. That was somehow worse. Only exhaustion. I tried to warn you, she whispered softly. Damien nearly broke apart hearing it. Because she had. During the final weeks of their marriage, Evelyn constantly questioned Vanessa's growing control over the company. Damien accused her of jealousy instead. He even remembered the exact sentence that ended their marriage forever. You are paranoid and insecure, Evelyn. Maybe if you trusted me instead of attacking every woman around me, we would still be happy. Happy. The word disgusted him now. The ambulance sirens became audible outside the hotel. Julian carefully helped Evelyn sit upright, while paramedics rushed into the ballroom carrying equipment. Damien instinctively moved closer again. Please let me help, he said desperately. Julian looked at him with open contempt. Now you want to help? Damien deserved that. Every bit of it. Evelyn suddenly reached weakly for Damien's sleeve before Julian could stop her. Her fingers trembled violently against the fabric of his tuxedo. Do not fight tonight, she whispered. I am too tired. Those 7 words shattered something inside him permanently. Too tired. Not angry. Not hateful. Just tired. Tired from surviving alone while he celebrated his new life under chandeliers and cameras. One paramedic crouched beside Evelyn quickly. How far along are you, ma'am? 34 weeks. Julian answered immediately before Evelyn could speak. The paramedic frowned. Any complications? Julian hesitated briefly. Damien noticed. Her blood pressure has been unstable, Julian finally admitted. And she has stress-related cardiac complications. Damien felt all oxygen leave his lungs. Cardiac complications. His eyes snapped toward Evelyn in panic. What does that mean? Julian stared at him for several long seconds before answering. It means the woman you threw away has been working double shifts while pregnant because her insurance disappeared after the divorce. Damien physically staggered backward. No. No. Whitmore Holdings had the best medical coverage in New York. Evelyn once joked she could survive a spaceship crash with their insurance plan. But after the divorce finalized, the coverage ended automatically. Damien signed those documents himself without reading the details because Vanessa assured him everything had been handled fairly. Evelyn suddenly cried out softly in pain, one hand tightening protectively over her stomach. The paramedic's expression sharpened instantly. We need to move now. Julian nodded and carefully lifted Evelyn into his arms before Damien could react. The movement looked practiced. Familiar. Damien hated how much that hurt. But deeper than jealousy now was shame. Crushing, unbearable shame. As Julian carried Evelyn toward the ballroom exit, Damien followed automatically until Evelyn whispered something barely audible. Please, do not let him come. Julian stopped walking immediately. Damien froze in place. Those words hurt more than any public humiliation possibly could. Because he finally understood the truth. Evelyn was not afraid of losing him anymore. She was afraid of trusting him again. And that realization terrified Damien Whitmore more than losing his company, his reputation, or his engagement ever could. The flashing ambulance lights painted the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan in violent shades of red and blue while Damien Whitmore stood frozen beneath the entrance of the Grand Astoria Hotel watching the woman he once promised forever disappear behind closing ambulance doors. He had spent 2 years convincing himself Evelyn Carter betrayed him. 2 years turning heartbreak into anger because anger was easier to carry than guilt. But now guilt was all he had left. "Sir, your fiancée is asking for you upstairs." One of the hotel managers spoke carefully beside him, almost nervously. Damien did not even turn around. Through the ambulance window he could still see Evelyn lying against white hospital blankets, while paramedics adjusted monitors around her. Julian Hayes sat beside her protectively, his hand wrapped around hers the entire time. Damien hated how naturally Julian fit there. More than that, he hated himself for giving another man the chance to become the person Evelyn depended on. The ambulance pulled away from the curb with sirens screaming into the rainy night. Damien moved before thinking. "Get the car," he ordered his driver sharply. "Now." 20 minutes later, St. Matthew Medical Center buzzed with late-night chaos. Nurses rushed through bright hallways carrying charts and medication, while exhausted families sat beneath fluorescent lights holding coffee cups and fear in equal measure. Damien had donated millions to this hospital over the years. Tonight it felt colder than any boardroom he had ever entered. The receptionist immediately recognized him. "Mr. Whitmore, Evelyn Carter," he interrupted breathlessly. "What room?" The woman hesitated after checking the computer. "I am sorry, sir. Ms. Carter requested no visitors." The words hit harder than they should have. Damien ran one hand through his damp hair. "Please. I just need to know if she is okay." Before the receptionist could answer, Julian's voice appeared behind him like a storm cloud. "She is alive." Damien turned sharply. Julian stood near the elevator holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He looked exhausted now beneath the harsh hospital lighting. Older somehow. Damien suddenly realized this man had probably been carrying Evelyn's pain long before tonight. "I need to see her," Damien said quietly. Julian studied him for several seconds before answering. "Why?" The question sounded simple. It was not. Damien opened his mouth but nothing came out immediately. Why? Because he needed forgiveness? Because he needed answers? Because seeing Evelyn collapse ripped open something inside him he could not close again? Finally he whispered the only truth he had left. "Because I think I destroyed her." Julian's expression shifted slightly. Not softer, but less hostile. "You did." Damien looked away immediately. The honesty hurt. "She lost everything after the divorce." Julian continued quietly. "The apartment. Her insurance. Most of her savings went into legal fees trying to fight the accusations Vanessa created." Damien felt sick again hearing Vanessa's name. "Why did Evelyn not tell me?" Julian laughed once under his breath without humor. "Tell you what exactly? That your lawyers froze her accounts? That gossip sites destroyed her reputation because your engagement to Vanessa became national news 2 weeks after the divorce?" Damien closed his eyes briefly. He remembered those headlines now. "Billionaire Damien Whitmore finds love again after toxic marriage ends." Back then Vanessa called the articles positive publicity. Dear God. The baby. Damien forced himself to ask. "Is it really mine?" Julian stared at him for a long moment before answering. "Evelyn found out she was pregnant 3 days after you signed the divorce papers." Damien physically leaned against the wall beside him like his legs could no longer hold his weight. 3 days. 3 days separated fatherhood from complete destruction. Why did she never tell me? Julian's jaw tightened. Because she heard you tell your attorney you wished she would disappear from your life permanently. Damien remembered the conversation instantly. He said it in anger during one of the ugliest days of the divorce. He never imagined Evelyn overheard him. Another memory surfaced suddenly. Evelyn standing silently outside his office door the same afternoon with tears in her eyes before quietly walking away. He never followed her. She tried surviving alone first. Julian continued. 3 jobs. A rented room in Queens. Then complications started during the pregnancy. Damien's chest tightened painfully. Complications? Julian looked exhausted now. Stress-induced cardiac issues. High blood pressure. Fainting episodes. Damien pressed trembling fingers against his mouth. Every word felt like another weight crushing his lungs. How did you meet her? Julian looked toward the hospital corridor before answering quietly. 8 months ago she collapsed at a bus stop outside one of my biotech offices during a snowstorm. Damien stared at him in disbelief. Snowstorm. Bus stop. Evelyn used to complain if the penthouse thermostat dropped below 70 degrees. She was trying to walk home after a 14-hour shift because she could not afford another cab that week. Julian said. She nearly lost the baby that night. Damien felt something inside him fracture completely. He remembered Evelyn during their marriage carrying bags of groceries only if the handles looked comfortable enough for her hands. He remembered warming her side of the bed before she slept because she hated cold sheets. And while he celebrated vacations with Vanessa in Europe, Evelyn had apparently been collapsing in snowstorms carrying his child. His child. The realization still felt unreal. Did she? Damien swallowed hard. Did she ever hate me? Julian finally looked directly at him again. No, he answered quietly. That was the worst part. Damien's eyes burned instantly. Julian sighed heavily and handed him one of the untouched coffee cups. She defended you constantly, he admitted reluctantly. Even after everything. She kept saying the Damien she loved would never intentionally destroy her. She blamed herself for not fighting harder to prove the truth. Damien nearly broke. Hearing that. Because Evelyn still believed in the version of him he no longer deserved to be. The elevator dinged softly nearby. Both men turned as a doctor stepped into the hallway holding a tablet. Family of Evelyn Carter? Damien moved immediately. I am here. The doctor looked between him and Julian briefly. She is stable for now, she explained carefully. But her stress levels are extremely dangerous this late into pregnancy. Damien exhaled shakily for what felt like the first time in hours. Stable. Thank God. Can I see her? He asked quietly. The doctor hesitated. She specifically requested Mr. Hayes only. Damien lowered his eyes immediately. Of course she did. Julian started toward the elevator but paused beside Damien first. If you really love her, he said quietly, stop making tonight about your guilt and start thinking about what she needs instead. Then he disappeared upstairs, leaving Damien alone beneath cold fluorescent lights with nothing except silence, regret, and the terrible realization that the woman he lost might still be suffering because of choices he made too blindly to question. By 3 o'clock in the morning the hospital waiting room had become painfully quiet. The rain outside still hammered against the windows of St. Matthew Medical Center, while Damien Whitmore sat alone beneath fluorescent lights that made every hour feel colder than the last. His tuxedo jacket lay folded beside him now, wrinkled and forgotten. His phone had not stopped vibrating for nearly an hour. Board members, reporters, lawyers, even his mother. He ignored every single call. Because none of it mattered anymore. Not the company. Not the engagement scandal exploding across social media. Not the headlines already spreading through Manhattan. The only thing Damien could think about was Evelyn lying upstairs carrying a child he never knew existed. A child who apparently almost died while he toasted champagne beside another woman. The guilt sat inside his chest like concrete. Heavy. Unmoving. Suffocating. Across the television mounted near the ceiling, financial news channels had already begun dissecting the disaster unfolding around Whitmore Holdings. Sources now confirm federal investigators are reviewing evidence connected to financial manipulation inside Whitmore Holdings, one anchor announced smoothly. The scandal erupted publicly tonight during Damien Whitmore's engagement gala at the Grand Astoria Hotel. Damien lowered his eyes immediately. He could not bear hearing Evelyn's humiliation turned into entertainment for strangers. A soft sound interrupted the silence nearby. Footsteps. Damien looked up sharply, expecting another reporter somehow sneaking into the hospital. Instead, he saw an older nurse approaching carefully with a small paper bag in her hands. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked gently. Damien stood immediately. "Is Evelyn okay?" The nurse nodded once. "She is resting for now." Damien finally exhaled shakily. "Resting. Thank God." The nurse hesitated before extending the paper bag toward him. "Ms. Carter asked me to give you this if you were still here." Damien stared at the bag in confusion before taking it carefully. The nurse offered him a sympathetic smile before walking away. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside was a folded ultrasound photo. Damien froze instantly. A tiny profile stared back at him beneath grainy black and white shadows. Their baby. His throat tightened so hard it hurt to swallow. There was writing at the bottom in Evelyn's handwriting. Week 22. He kicked when I played Sinatra. Damien physically sat back down because his knees no longer worked properly. Sinatra. Evelyn used to play old jazz records every Sunday morning while cooking breakfast. She once joked that if they ever had children, their babies would probably come out dancing to Frank Sinatra songs. Damien stared at the ultrasound for a long time while memories slowly destroyed him piece by piece. Evelyn asleep against his shoulder during flights. Evelyn reading novels beside the fireplace wearing his sweaters. Evelyn laughing barefoot in their kitchen. He had spent 2 years forcing himself to remember only betrayal. Now all the good memories were returning at once, and they hurt far more. Another folded paper slipped from the bag onto his lap. Damien unfolded it carefully. His breath caught immediately. They were overdue hospital bills. Thousands of dollars. Medication costs. Cardiology appointments. High-risk pregnancy monitoring. Some invoices were stamped past due in bright red letters. Damien felt physically ill. Evelyn once donated anonymously to women's shelters during Christmas because she said nobody carrying a child should ever feel abandoned. And somehow he allowed her to become exactly that. At the bottom of the stack sat a tiny receipt from a diner in Queens. 1 coffee. 1 grilled cheese sandwich. Total, $8.75. Damien stared at it in disbelief because he remembered spending $12,000 on champagne alone for the engagement party tonight. Suddenly another memory surfaced. 6 months ago Vanessa casually complained during dinner about seeing a pregnant waitress resting near one of their office buildings. "Some people really should not have children if they cannot afford them," Vanessa said dismissively back then. Damien remembered nodding distractedly while answering emails. Dear God. Was that Evelyn? The thought nearly made him sick. Footsteps approached again from the hallway elevators. Damien quickly wiped his face before looking up. Julian stepped into the waiting room holding a folder beneath one arm. He looked exhausted now, dark circles visible beneath his eyes. But there was something else there too. Relief. "She is sleeping," Julian said quietly before Damien could ask. Damien nodded immediately. "Thank you for staying with her." Julian studied him silently for a moment. "She asked for you once?" Damien's heart stopped. "What?" "While they were stabilizing her blood pressure," Julian explained. "She woke up confused and asked if you still hated her." Damien closed his eyes instantly like the words physically wounded him. "I never hated her," he whispered. Julian's expression hardened slightly. "You made her believe you did." Damien could not argue with that. Silence settled between them again until Julian finally sat across from him and placed the folder onto the table between them. "There is something you need to see." Damien opened the folder slowly. Financial statements. Wire transfers. Shell companies. His stomach tightened immediately. Vanessa's name appeared repeatedly beside missing corporate funds totaling millions of dollars. The federal investigation started 4 months ago, Julian explained quietly. Evelyn discovered discrepancies before the divorce, but nobody listened to her. Damien's hands tightened around the papers. Why are you helping me? Julian looked genuinely surprised by the question. I am not helping you, he answered honestly. I am helping her. That hurt because it was true. Julian continued quietly. Evelyn spent 2 years believing you were manipulated, not cruel. She never wanted revenge against you. Damien looked down at the ultrasound photo again. And you? He asked carefully. What do you want? Julian leaned back slowly, exhaustion visible in every movement now. I want the mother of that child alive long enough to hold him. The words knocked all remaining air from Damien's lungs. Him? Julian nodded once. It is a boy. Damien stared at the ultrasound picture again with completely different eyes now. A son. He had a son. A terrifying wave of emotion crashed through him so hard he could barely think straight. He imagined tiny hands. Evelyn smiling softly while holding their child. Birthday parties. Bedtime stories. First steps. All the moments he almost lost forever because he trusted the wrong person and abandoned the right one. The elevator doors opened softly again at the end of the hallway. This time it was a doctor approaching quickly with concern written across her face. Julian stood immediately. What happened? The doctor looked directly at both men. Ms. Carter's blood pressure is climbing again, she said carefully. Stress is putting the baby under serious strain. Damien's heart immediately dropped. Can I see her now? The doctor hesitated briefly before answering. She is asking for you. The hallway outside Evelyn's room suddenly felt colder than the Manhattan rain outside. Damien Whitmore stood frozen for half a second after hearing the doctor's words. She is asking for you. Not Julian. Not a nurse. Him. After everything he had done, Evelyn still wanted to see him. The realization terrified him. More than rejection would have. His hands shook slightly as he followed the doctor down the quiet cardiac wing of St. Matthew Medical Center. Every step felt heavier than the last. Machines beeped softly from distant rooms. Nurses moved through dim hallways carrying charts and exhaustion. Somewhere nearby, a newborn baby cried for the first time. The sound stopped Damien in his tracks for one brief moment because it hit him all at once again. He was going to be a father. And he almost lost both of them before he even knew they existed. The doctor paused outside room 814. Her stress levels are dangerous right now, she warned quietly. Please keep the conversation calm. Damien nodded immediately. Calm. He would do anything she asked now. Anything. The door opened softly. The first thing Damien noticed was how small Evelyn looked beneath the hospital blankets. She had always been graceful and elegant during their marriage, the kind of woman who somehow made every room softer just by entering it. Now she looked fragile in a way that physically hurt him. Her blonde hair spread across the white pillow in loose waves. A heart monitor blinked steadily beside her bed. One hand rested protectively over the curve of her stomach even in sleep. Damien stood silently near the doorway for several seconds because suddenly he could not breathe properly again. Evelyn slowly opened her eyes at the sound of movement. For one disoriented second she looked frightened. Then she recognized him. Damien. His name sounded weaker than he had ever heard before. He moved closer immediately. Hey, he whispered carefully. Do not try to sit up. Evelyn gave the faintest smile. You still sound bossy. The tiny joke nearly destroyed him because it sounded like the old Evelyn for just a moment. Before the lies. Before the divorce. Before he failed her completely. Damien pulled a chair beside the bed and sat carefully. Either of them spoke at first. Rain tapped softly against the hospital windows while the city lights shimmered beyond the glass. Finally Evelyn looked down at the ultrasound photo still folded in Damien's hands. Her eyes softened instantly. You found it. Damien swallowed. Hard. His heart beat. His voice almost broke. I should have been there. Evelyn looked away quietly. I stopped expecting you a long time ago. The honesty in her voice hurt more than anger ever could. Damien lowered his eyes immediately. I thought you betrayed me, he admitted quietly. I know. 2 simple words. No bitterness. No screaming. Somehow that made the guilt unbearable. Why did you not tell me about the baby? He asked softly after a long silence. Evelyn stared toward the rain-covered window before answering. Because I heard you tell your lawyer you wished I would disappear forever. Damien physically flinched. Hearing his own cruelty repeated aloud felt sickening now. Evelyn continued quietly. After that, I figured our son deserved a father who actually wanted him. Damien pressed trembling fingers against his mouth. I would have wanted him, he whispered desperately. God, Evelyn, I would have loved him. Tears gathered silently in her eyes then. I know that now, she admitted softly. But back then I did not. Silence settled again between them. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm while Damien stared at the woman he once loved more than his own ambition. Maybe he still did. Maybe he never stopped. What is his name? He asked carefully. Evelyn looked surprised by the question. Then one hand moved slowly over her stomach again. Noah, she whispered. Noah. Damien repeated the name silently in his mind like something sacred. Noah Whitmore? Evelyn hesitated. That hesitation nearly shattered him. I was not sure if he should carry your last name, she admitted honestly. Damien nodded slowly because he deserved that uncertainty. Does he kick a lot? He asked after a moment. Evelyn gave a tired laugh so soft it barely filled the room. Mostly when Sinatra plays. Damien smiled despite everything. Tears burned behind his eyes immediately afterward because suddenly he could picture it perfectly. Evelyn alone in some tiny apartment playing old jazz songs beside a second-hand crib, while carrying their son through lonely nights he should have shared with her. I missed everything, he whispered. Evelyn studied him carefully then. Almost like she was trying to decide whether the regret in his voice was real. You missed the scary parts too, she said quietly. The hospital visits. The nights I thought I lost him. The mornings I could not afford breakfast before work. Damien closed his eyes briefly because every sentence felt like another knife turning deeper inside him. Why did you never ask me for help? Evelyn looked genuinely confused by the question. Help? She repeated softly. Damien, your lawyers threatened me with defamation lawsuits after the divorce. His eyes snapped open instantly. What? Vanessa handled most communication after the settlement, Evelyn explained weakly. She told me contacting you again would ruin your reputation and trigger legal consequences. Damien felt rage rise so suddenly he had to grip the side of the chair to stay calm. Vanessa isolated Evelyn intentionally. Controlled the narrative. Controlled him. Dear God. Evelyn noticed the anger in his face immediately. Please do not do anything reckless, she whispered. I cannot handle more chaos right now. Damien forced himself to breathe slowly. She was right. This was not about revenge anymore. It was about protecting her and Noah. For the first time in years, Damien suddenly understood what truly mattered. Evelyn shifted slightly against the pillows before speaking again. There is something else you need to know. Her voice changed. Softer now. More frightened. Damien straightened immediately. What is it? Evelyn looked down at her stomach before answering. The doctors think stress may force an early delivery if my blood pressure keeps climbing. Damien felt all warmth leave his body instantly. How early? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears she tried hard not to let fall. Sooner than Noah is supposed to come. The heart monitor beeped steadily between them while fear settled silently into the room. Then Evelyn reached for his hand for the first time in 2 years. Her fingers trembled against his. If something happens to me, she whispered weakly, promise me you will not let our son grow up believing he was unwanted. Damien Whitmore had closed billion-dollar deals without flinching. He had stood In rooms filled with investors, politicians, and corporate sharks who built careers destroying weaker men. None of them ever made him feel fear like the woman lying in front of him now. Evelyn's trembling fingers still rested against his hand while the heart monitor beside her bed continued its soft rhythmic beeping. If something happens to me. The sentence echoed inside Damien's chest like a nightmare he could not wake up from. Do not say that, he whispered immediately. Evelyn gave him a tired smile that somehow looked heartbreakingly calm. Pregnancy complications are real, Damien. Nothing is happening to you. His voice cracked slightly. I will not let it happen. Evelyn studied him quietly for several seconds. You used to say things like that before every thunderstorm. Damien blinked in surprise. The memory returned instantly. Their first apartment together in Boston. Tiny kitchen. Cheap furniture. Evelyn terrified of storms because lightning once hit a tree outside her childhood home. Damien used to hold her through every storm and promise nothing bad could reach her while he was there. The cruelest part was realizing she believed him back then. A soft knock interrupted the silence. The doctor stepped carefully into the room carrying another chart. Her expression looked professional but tense. Damien recognized that look immediately from boardrooms and emergency negotiations. It was the face people made before delivering bad news. Ms. Carter, the doctor began gently. We need to monitor the baby again. Evelyn nodded weakly while nurses entered carrying equipment. Damien instinctively stood to move aside, but one of the nurses smiled softly. You can stay if she wants you here. For one uncertain second Damien looked toward Evelyn. She hesitated only briefly before giving the smallest nod. That tiny gesture felt more valuable than every business victory Damien had ever achieved. The nurse adjusted straps carefully around Evelyn's stomach while the monitor beside the bed flickered alive with static. Then suddenly the room filled with sound. Fast. Strong. Rhythmic. Noah's heartbeat. Damien physically stopped breathing. The sound was overwhelming in the most terrifyingly beautiful way imaginable. His son. Alive. Real. Evelyn watched his face carefully while tears slowly filled his eyes. That is him, she whispered softly. Damien laughed once under his breath in disbelief while staring at the monitor screen like nothing else in the world existed anymore. He sounds strong. He is stubborn, Evelyn corrected quietly. Just like his father. The nurse smiled while making adjustments. Most babies settle when parents talk nearby. Damien looked uncertain immediately. Talk? Your voice helps, the nurse explained gently. Babies recognize familiar sounds late in pregnancy. Familiar sounds. The words nearly crushed him because Noah had never heard his father's voice before tonight. Damien swallowed hard before leaning slightly closer toward Evelyn's stomach. He felt ridiculous for half a second. Then emotion took over completely. Hey Noah, he whispered shakily. I know I am late. Evelyn closed her eyes instantly as tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Damien continued softly, voice breaking more with every word. But I am here now, buddy. And I swear I am going to spend the rest of my life making this right. The monitor suddenly shifted. Noah's heartbeat strengthened slightly. The nurse smiled immediately. There, she said softly. He recognizes comfort. Damien pressed one trembling hand against his mouth because the moment felt too overwhelming to survive intact. Evelyn reached slowly toward him again. He kicked, she whispered. Damien looked stunned. Really? Evelyn gently guided his hand against the side of her stomach. For one suspended moment nothing happened. Then suddenly a tiny movement pressed back against his palm. Damien froze completely. Noah kicked again. Small. Real. Alive. A broken sound escaped Damien's throat before he could stop it. He dropped his head slightly as tears finally spilled freely down his face. Evelyn watched him quietly, exhaustion mixing with sadness in her expression. I used to imagine this moment constantly, she admitted softly. You talking to him. Feeling him move. Damien looked up at her with raw devastation in his eyes. I should have been there for all of it. Yes, Evelyn answered honestly. No cruelty. No dramatic anger. Just truth. Somehow truth hurt far more. A sharp buzz suddenly interrupted the peaceful moment. Damien's phone vibrated violently inside his pocket again and again. He ignored it immediately until the screen lit up with one name repeatedly. Richard Lawson, chairman of Whitmore Holdings. Damien's stomach tightened instantly. Something was wrong. He answered reluctantly while stepping a few feet away from the bed. What? Richard's voice sounded tense. The board is holding an emergency vote tomorrow morning. Damien closed his eyes briefly. Of course they were. Because of the scandal? Because federal investigators just froze 3 company accounts tied to Vanessa Sinclair. Richard answered sharply. And because investors are panicking after tonight's media disaster. Damien looked back toward Evelyn immediately. Hospital bed. Pale face. Their unborn son. Suddenly the company felt meaningless compared to this room. Handle it without me, Damien said flatly. Silence hit the other end of the call. Damien, if you miss this meeting, you could lose control of the company. Damien stared at Noah's heartbeat flickering across the monitor. 2 years ago that warning would have terrified him. Tonight it barely registered. Then maybe I deserve to. He answered quietly before ending the call. When he turned back around, Evelyn was watching him carefully. Your company? She asked weakly. Damien moved back beside her immediately. It can wait. Evelyn gave him a long look filled with emotions too complicated for words. The old Damien would never have said that. He lowered his eyes slowly. Maybe the old Damien was not someone worth becoming again. Silence settled softly around them while rain continued tapping against the hospital windows. Then suddenly Evelyn's expression tightened sharply. Her hand gripped the blanket. The monitor shifted again. Evelyn? Damien's voice instantly changed with panic. She inhaled shakily. Something feels wrong. Nurses moved immediately. The doctor looked at the monitors with sudden focus while another contraction tightened visibly across Evelyn's exhausted body. Her blood pressure is climbing again, one nurse warned quickly. The doctor's expression darkened. We may not be able to stop labor much longer. Damien felt cold terror flood through him instantly while Evelyn grabbed his hand hard enough to hurt. Then she looked directly into his eyes with fear for the first time all night. Damien, she whispered shakily. I do not think Noah is waiting anymore. Everything changed in less than 60 seconds. One moment Damien Whitmore was holding Evelyn's trembling hand beside the hospital bed while listening to Noah's heartbeat echo softly through the monitor. The next moment the room exploded into movement. Nurses rushed toward the machines. The doctor's calm expression vanished completely. Alarms began sounding somewhere behind Damien while Evelyn curled slightly against the pillows, fighting another painful contraction. Her blood pressure is spiking, one nurse warned quickly. We are losing stability. Damien felt pure terror slam into his chest. What does that mean? The doctor turned sharply toward him while adjusting gloves. It means the stress on her heart is becoming dangerous for both mother and baby. Mother and baby. The words hit differently now. Not medical terms. His family. Evelyn grabbed Damien's hand tighter as another contraction hit. Her breathing became uneven. I am scared, she whispered for the first time all night. Hearing that nearly shattered him. Evelyn had survived homelessness, humiliation, loneliness, and pregnancy complications mostly alone without ever letting fear show openly. But now fear filled her eyes completely. Damien moved closer immediately. Hey, he whispered shakily. Look at me. You are not alone anymore. Tears slipped silently down Evelyn's cheeks while nurses continued preparing equipment around her. The room suddenly felt too bright. Too loud. Too fast. The doctor looked toward the monitor again before making a decision. We need to move her to labor and delivery now. Damien's heart stopped. Tonight? The baby cannot handle prolonged stress, the doctor explained quickly. And neither can she. A nurse immediately unlocked the hospital bed while another disconnected. Monitors for transport. Damien stayed beside Evelyn the entire time, refusing to let go of her hand even for a second. The hallway outside blurred into white lights and rushing footsteps as they moved quickly through the cardiac wing. Damien walked beside the moving bed while Evelyn fought to control her breathing. "You are doing great," he kept whispering even though his own voice trembled badly. "You are doing amazing." Evelyn gave the faintest exhausted laugh through tears. "You always panic when you care too much." Damien almost smiled despite the fear crushing him. "That has not changed." The elevator doors opened onto the maternity floor. Warm lighting. Soft pastel walls. Newborn cries echoing faintly from distant rooms. Damien never imagined entering this part of a hospital like this. Not after missing every ultrasound appointment. Every doctor visit. Every milestone he should have shared with her. A nurse stopped him outside the delivery suite while staff prepared inside. "Sir, we need a few minutes." Damien immediately shook his head. "No. I am staying with her." The nurse hesitated briefly before looking toward Evelyn. Exhausted and pale beneath the hospital lights, Evelyn slowly reached her hand toward him again. "Please stay." That was all it took. Moments later, Damien stood beside her inside the delivery room while doctors monitored both her heart and Noah's. Machines beeped steadily around them. Rain still tapped against distant windows overlooking Manhattan. Somewhere beyond those walls, the world continued obsessing over scandals, headlines, and collapsing fortunes. None of it mattered here. Not anymore. Only Evelyn. Only Noah. Another contraction hit harder this time. Evelyn gasped sharply and gripped Damien's hand with surprising strength. Instinct immediately took over inside him. "Breathe with me," he whispered softly. "Come on. Just like this." He demonstrated slow, steady breaths while brushing damp hair away from her face. Evelyn followed shakily. "There you go," he whispered. "I have you." The doctor studied the monitors carefully before speaking again. "Noah's heartbeat is holding for now, but we cannot let her blood pressure climb any further." Damien looked toward the screen displaying their son's heartbeat. "Fast. Fragile. Precious. What can I do?" he asked desperately. The doctor answered honestly. "Keep her calm." Calm. Damien almost laughed bitterly because he was the reason her life became chaos in the first place. Then suddenly Evelyn looked up at him with tears in her eyes again. "I never wanted Noah to grow up hating you," she whispered weakly. Damien felt his throat tighten instantly. "Evelyn, even after everything," she continued softly, "I kept thinking about the good version of you. The man who danced with me in our kitchen at 2 a.m. because I could not sleep. The man who cried when we rescued that old golden retriever from the shelter." Damien physically broke hearing that memory. Charlie. Their old rescue dog who used to sleep across Evelyn's feet every night before cancer took him years ago. That man still exists. Evelyn whispered. "I know he does." Damien lowered his forehead against her trembling hand because he could not survive looking at her while carrying this much regret. "I do not deserve how good you still are," he whispered brokenly. Another sharp contraction interrupted the moment. The monitors shifted again. Nurses moved quickly. "Pressure is climbing," one warned. The doctor's expression tightened immediately. "We need to prepare for possible emergency delivery." Fear spread through the room instantly. Damien's entire body went cold. Evelyn looked terrified now too despite trying to hide it. "Noah is too early," she whispered weakly. Damien moved closer immediately. "Hey. Listen to me." He gently held both sides of her face, forcing her to focus only on him. "Our son already survived everything life threw at him before he was even born. He is stronger than both of us combined." Evelyn's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You sound like a father already." The words hit Damien so hard he almost could not breathe again. Father. He wanted that more than anything now. More than Whitmore Holdings. More than money. More than power. A sudden commotion outside the delivery room interrupted everything. Raised voices. Quick footsteps. Then the door opened. Sharply. Julian stepped inside looking grim. Damien immediately knew something else had gone wrong. What happened? Julian looked directly at him before answering. Federal agents just arrested Vanessa Sinclair. Evelyn closed her eyes slowly while Damien felt another chapter of his old life collapse completely behind him. But Julian was not finished. And the media found out about Noah. Silence swallowed the room instantly. Damien's blood ran cold. What? Julian handed him a phone displaying breaking news headlines already flooding every major outlet in America. Billionaire Damien Whitmore's secret unborn son revealed during federal fraud scandal. Damien stared at the screen in horror while cameras and reporters apparently already surrounded the hospital downstairs. Then Evelyn suddenly whispered something so softly he almost missed it. They are going to turn our baby into entertainment. And for the first time all night, Damien realized the world was no longer just threatening his reputation. It was coming for his family. The cameras arrived before sunrise. By 5 a.m, every entrance to St. Matthew Medical Center was flooded with reporters holding umbrellas beneath cold Manhattan rain, while headlines about Damien Whitmore's secret unborn son spread across every major news channel in America. But inside the delivery room none of that mattered anymore. Because Evelyn was struggling to breathe through another contraction, while doctors monitored Noah's heartbeat with growing concern. Damien stayed beside her without moving more than a few inches away the entire night. He held her hand through every painful wave. He wiped tears from her face. He whispered softly to her every time fear returned to her eyes. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, Damien realized something terrifyingly simple. He would trade every dollar he owned just to keep her safe. Pressure is rising again, one nurse warned quietly while checking monitors. The doctor nodded grimly. We cannot wait much longer. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, exhausted beyond words now. Sweat dampened loose strands of blonde hair against her forehead, while the heart monitor beside her bed continued its relentless rhythm. Damien brushed her hair back carefully. Hey, he whispered softly. Look at me. Her eyes slowly opened. You still here? She asked weakly. Damien almost smiled despite the fear crushing his chest. I am not leaving again. Something inside Evelyn's expression softened at those words. Not complete trust. Not yet. But maybe the smallest beginning of it. Suddenly another contraction hit harder than before. Evelyn cried out softly and gripped Damien's hand so tightly his fingers hurt. He welcomed the pain because at least it reminded him she was still here with him. You are doing incredible, he whispered shakily. Noah is lucky already. Tears slid down Evelyn's cheeks. I wanted him to have your smile, she admitted softly between breaths. Damien's throat tightened instantly. He will. The doctor stepped closer after another glance at the monitors. We are moving forward now, she explained carefully. The baby's stress levels are becoming dangerous. Damien's pulse immediately spiked. Dangerous how? The doctor answered honestly. He needs to come soon. Fear exploded through the room like electricity. Nurses moved quickly preparing equipment, while another doctor entered quietly. Everything suddenly happened too fast. Too many voices. Too many machines. Too much fear. Damien leaned close to Evelyn again while she trembled beneath the blankets. Listen to me, he whispered desperately. Noah already has the strongest mother in the world. He is going to fight because you taught him how. Evelyn looked at him with tears filling her exhausted eyes. I do not want him growing up without me. Damien felt his entire chest crack open hearing that fear aloud. He pressed his forehead gently against hers. He will know you, he promised shakily. He will know how kind you are. How stubborn. How you dance barefoot in kitchens when nobody is watching. Evelyn laughed weakly through tears. I hate you for remembering that. I remember everything, Damien whispered. And he did. Every small beautiful detail he spent 2 years trying to bury beneath anger and pride. Suddenly Noah's heartbeat shifted sharply on the monitor. The room instantly changed. Nurses moved faster. The doctor's voice became urgent. We need to do this now. Damien stepped back only when nurses instructed him to while doctors surrounded Evelyn's bed. Fear consumed him completely now. He had built empires from nothing. Controlled boardrooms with a single sentence. None of it prepared him for standing helplessly while the two people he loved most fought inside a hospital room. Minutes felt endless. Damien stood near the wall, unable to breathe properly while hearing fragments of instructions and monitor sounds around him. Evelyn reached her hand blindly toward him once during the chaos, and Damien immediately crossed back to her side, gripping her fingers tightly. "I am here," he whispered over and over. "I am right here." Then suddenly everything changed again. A sharp sound cut through the room. Small. Fragile. Angry. Noah cried for the first time. Damien physically stopped breathing. Every person in the room seemed to freeze for one suspended second while the tiny newborn cries echoed beneath hospital lights. Then relief exploded everywhere at once. Nurses smiled. One doctor exhaled heavily. Evelyn burst into tears instantly. Damien could not move at all. He simply stared in complete disbelief while a nurse carefully wrapped a tiny baby boy in blankets nearby. Noah. Their son. Alive. Real. Beautiful. "Would you like to meet him, Dad?" the nurse asked gently. Dad. The word shattered Damien completely. With trembling hands he stepped forward while the nurse carefully placed Noah into his arms. The baby looked impossibly small beneath pale blue blankets. Tiny fingers. Soft dark hair. Closed eyes. Damien felt tears stream down his face immediately as Noah instinctively wrapped one miniature hand around his finger. "Hi, buddy," Damien whispered brokenly. "I am so sorry I was late." Noah yawned softly instead of crying. Evelyn watched the moment from the hospital bed while tears slid silently across her exhausted smile. Damien looked toward her slowly while holding their son against his chest. "He has your eyes," Evelyn whispered. Damien crossed the room carefully before placing Noah gently into her arms. The second Evelyn held him, the entire room seemed softer somehow. Peaceful. Like the storm finally ended. Damien sat beside her quietly while Noah rested against Evelyn's chest beneath warm hospital blankets. Outside the hospital, reporters still shouted questions into cameras about scandals, arrests, and collapsing fortunes. But inside room 814 none of it mattered anymore. Because for the first time in years Damien Whitmore finally understood what wealth actually looked like. It looked like a tired blonde woman holding a newborn baby at sunrise while forgiving him more than he deserved. Evelyn looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully between them before whispering something so quietly Damien almost missed it. "Some people spend their whole lives chasing power," she said softly, "and still arrive too late to the things that matter most.